The Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
I suspect most of us have been there where we're starting out in our careers. We're not earning very much. We're trying to improve our quality of life, our standard of life. We want to live in a nice place. You want to have nice clothes. You want to have a nice car. You want to be seen to be better off than you were the year before and the year before that and the year before that. So you start spending. You might take on some debt. And you may get yourself into a spot of bother. Or you simply just spend according to your means, but you're not putting away anything for a rainy day. You're not thinking about the future. And you think to yourself, well, one day when I've got a proper job, not this starter job, not this beginner job, and I get paid lots of money. I get paid, I don't know, when you're starting out, we get 10,000. When I get paid 100,000 rand a month, then I'm going to save. And I wonder how many people get caught in that trap. Warren Ingram at Galileo Capital, is it something you see a lot?
I think it applies to somewhere around many more than half of salary earners, and I think it's probably more than 90% of them, 90 out of every 100 would fall into that category. And it's not always a trap. It's not always because they just have no discipline. It's often because they just have so little money and they start with so little that they need to build up assets in terms of transport. So they need to buy a car and they need to get clothes for work, and they need to get accommodation, all of those things. So the demands on people starting out and on their income is massive. And you're right. So they kind of, most of them would spend most of their, if not all of their money, and then as their salary rises, they get used to that experience, and it becomes easier to spend. I think I'd be really amazed with people with 100,000 a month are even saving 15% of that. I think they're still spending a lot, but the problem is, and as you highlighted, they now are really attractive to banks because these are now the high income earners who can afford enormous amounts of debt. So the banks just offer them any kind of debt you can think of, from credit cards, personal loans, overdrafts, really attractive car finance, not attractive interest rates, but just, easy to get. So the debt problem becomes massive. And so I think it's key how we start this race to make sure we go in the right direction and not, run completely backwards into a brick wall.
But it's pointless, Warren. I mean, I'm earning 10,000 rand a month, and you want me to put away how much every month? I mean, I get taxed, Warren. And I've got stuff to buy and things to do, and my friends are going out 3 times a week, and I want to go out 4. Don't cramp my style here, Warren. I've had a tough life. I've been studying very, very hard to go to university, and I spent an extra year there because I was dwarf, and whatever the case might be. And I promise I will save when I get it, when my salary grows from 10 to 20,000. So once I'm through my initial sort of introductory phase at work, then I'll start saving. Just cut me some slack, Warren. Don't be so mean.
I'll cut you some slack. So the slack I'll cut you is don't save the if we're talking about 10,000. If someone's starting out at 10,000, I'm going to say to them that you need to save at least 1,500. So 15% of what you earn before tax. But I hear the argument and I take the point. I was once young and starting out in my own life.
That was a long time ago.
And it was a long time ago. And so I think, full disclosure, I think it was about 2,000 a month is what I earned when I started. And so the issue there is saving nothing is my problem. I'm not saying, save 15%. I'm saying start with anything. Start with 50 rand a month. If you're earning 10,000 rand a month before tax, start with 50. And the next time you get a raise, take half of that. So let's say you do really well and you impress the bosses and they take your salary from 10 to 12 or 10 to 15. Take half of that increase and save that. So I'm not saying don't spend, and I'm not saying don't enjoy the fruits of your hard-earned work where you start to earn a bit more and therefore can spend a bit more. By all means, spend a bit more, but take half of the increase and save that, and do that every single time you get an increase, so that you don't get used to spending all of the money of the increase. I think there needs to be balance in life, and I think that's probably the evolution for me. Thinking about personal finances in the early days, it was all about the number. It was all about everybody should save 15%, at least when they start out, and no excuses. And, that's the way it must be.
And I wonder how damaging that mantra has been, because people go, well, that's unrealistic. I'm not doing it. It's almost an act of rebellion, almost an act of a cry of independence, which is incredibly immature. But I think, hands up, I think many of us have done that.
Absolutely. And, even if it's not an act of rebellion, maybe it's just a sense of hopelessness. If everyone's telling me I've got to save 15% and I can only save 4%, I'm not going to waste my time. 4% is useless. I'm not doing anything. So I'm just going to spend it all. And that's the mistake we've probably made in our industry for many decades. What we need to realize is little bits every month, when we're talking about savings, start to add up, and those little bits become bigger amounts. And it's that absolute cliched snowball down the hill. The more you add to it, eventually it gets faster and bigger, and it crushes all of your debt problems and gets you going. So what I would say to people starting out is, don't listen to me 20 years ago. Listen to me today. And today I'm telling you, just start with a little bit. Start with just anything you can. Get the habit going, and watch how that story starts to change as you do save more. But always give yourself a reward. I think that's human beings. We work with risk and reward. The more we can reward ourselves, and the more positive it becomes, the better. But I think the key there is, be careful how you spend that money on the reward. I think one huge mistake we make is we like to buy stuff. We want to buy fancy watches or cars or shoes or whatever it is. And unfortunately, we get about 3 minutes of a psychological thrill from buying the new thing and wearing the new shoes or whatever it is. But after that, it gives us no real joy. So be careful how you spend. I think the thing that really makes a massive impact is buying, or not buying, but spending money on experiences, spending money on holidays that you plan for the whole year, and then you go on that holiday and you share that experience with other people, or do something good for someone else. When you go out with friends, every now and then, be generous and pay the bill, do something good for someone else. If you can help, someone with their studies or anything where you can make a difference in someone else's life, has a huge impact on you. That's incredibly rewarding for years ahead. But buying stuff is where we get the debt, and where we actually don't get much reward. It becomes unfulfilling. And I think that's a mistake that we've probably made, for many years with our money, is we kind of get hooked on the stuff. The marketing companies tell us we have to buy the next big thing, whether it's the phone or the car, whatever it is, the new laptop. And that's actually not that sensible. That doesn't give us any real reward, and it doesn't help us stick to good habits in the years ahead in our career.
Let's talk about the advantage of putting money away, because we think it's small, we think it's tiny, and we think it's insignificant. But the advantage of incremental investment, let's say it starts at 500 Rand a month, and at the end of year one, you've got 500 Rand a month. That takes you up to 6,000 of capital invested. If you've been lucky, you've had a 10% gain on that. You've got 6,600 Rand. It's not very much at all. It's fairly insignificant. But in year two, your salary goes up from 10 to 20, and you might not take all of the 5 and put that into investments, but you're up from, say, 500 to 2,000 Rand a month. And you suddenly, by the end of year two, you've invested 24,000 Rands worth of capital, which gives you 30,600 at another 10% there. Now you've got nearly 35,000 invested. Suddenly it starts to become a bit more meaningful. You get another promotion. You get a bit of a bonus, and you put that in. And suddenly, within 5 years, by the time you are 27, there's 100,000 Rand invested that you've not had to bleed particularly hard over or sacrifice particularly much to achieve.
And I think the magic there is you haven't got used to a sacrifice. You haven't got used to the money and now had to cut it off. Cut the spending down again. You've got used to incrementally improving your lifestyle every single year. So you've felt no trauma, no psychological pain from the decision. You've actually had benefit and had reward, and all of a sudden your 100,000 is generating you at least sort of the 10,000 a year, and it doesn't take long before the 100 is 500,000, and kind of 8 or 10 years in, you're sitting on 1 million Rand. You're a millionaire. I know that's a goal for a lot of us when we start out in life, and I think you're right, Bruce. I think it's that incremental saving, but also the incremental increase is huge. And by the time you're kind of in your mid-30s, you're saving a really reasonable amount of money every month. And all your friends who've been going out all the time and have got all the fancy cars and all the fancy stuff, they're sitting with enormous amounts of debt. And if you've avoided the debt trap and you've been saving, you might not drive the flashiest car and you might not wear the absolute best branded stuff. But the amazing thing is you're probably the richest out of your friends. They just don't know it because you're not flash. And I think that's the key here is, it's about what you really want. How do you get the right balance? And then how do you spend? I'm repeating myself, but I just think, if you can avoid the trap of spending on stuff, it becomes really rewarding later in life. And I think that for me has probably been the big learning, watching people who do achieve this success with their savings. I'm not talking about people that have, struck the kind of business starter lottery where they've built an app or whatever they've done. I'm just talking about ordinary kind of salaried people that have just done their thing. The ones that really achieve, they might look like they're living fairly humble lives. They don't. They do have good experiences. They do have great, rewarding lives, but they allow their capital to accumulate, and they get to that sort of age 45, 50 where they can stop work. But they're enjoying themselves so much because they've got the freedom to stop at any time. So they only take on the jobs they really like. And they become phenomenally successful simply because of that, both in careers and money. And not really making any kind of sacrifice, no real emotional loss, not living like a hermit on a hill.
Let's look at it slightly differently again and look from a habit perspective. If spending is a habit, and it is, I think, people who spend regularly and like to spend, and, you ask people what their big weakness is. Oh, it's clothes. Oh, it's shoes. Oh, it's handbags. Oh, it's art. Oh, which, could be an investment, maybe. Or, I like to drink good wine, or whatever it might be. You've got into the habit of those treats, of those short bursts of endorphins, which course through your veins for that 3-minute period you referred to earlier. In the same way that taking some of that money, not all of it, as you point out, and putting it aside for one day, by doing that, you're buying yourself financial freedom, which is a long-term endorphin rush, which very few people ever get to experience. And that's that sense of tranquility, that sense of peace, that actually, should the world go to hell in a handbasket, you'll be in a better position to cope should things go awry in your in the world or in your life, or suddenly you end up under a truck one day and you are unable to work. Suddenly you don't have to panic. You know that your kids will be going to school. You know that, as awful as your accident is, actually you've provided for all eventualities.
Yeah, I think the key word is freedom, because it gives you the freedom to make choices, not to stay working. And I think it's amazing talking to people late in their careers, how many people absolutely hate the job that they're in. And when I ask them why, it's because they can't afford to do something different. They can't afford just to take a risk to say, well, I don't want to change jobs now and try for something I really like or something that's really rewarding, because I simply can't afford to do it. And I think that, the people that get to freedom, financial freedom, it's the freedom to say, gee, I've got sufficient money. I might not be able to live, an absolutely lavish life, but I could live for a few years earning, not as much money as I used to, because I can take maybe a career step sideways and maybe slightly backwards to do something I really enjoy and something that's rewarding. And it's amazing how the two overlap. The people that get to some form of financial freedom, and I'm really not talking about people who become incredibly wealthy, just people who can exercise control over their money and don't have huge debt burdens and allow their money to keep growing. They're the ones that seem to derive a lot more enjoyment. So, people who say money can't buy you happiness, I don't believe that. I think no money and massive debt is a great recipe for real misery in life. And then you have no choices, and human beings don't function well with zero choice. We hate everything. Then I know that for myself. But when you've got choice and you are in a position of strength financially, then all of a sudden things become a lot better. So you're right. I think it's a huge benefit to kind of getting yourself on a footing. And I think It really is. I mean, it's, I hear myself say this, and I mean, and it maybe sounds crazy, but it's possible for everybody. All we've got to do is start small, keep our cost base low, and if we don't spend a huge amount, we don't need a massive amount of capital to fund that spending. And and I think again, planning your holidays or whatever it is that really excites you, even if it's fancy wine, just not going out and splurging, but budgeting for it and setting the money aside and giving yourself a reward when you achieve your financial goals. Those are great spending habits and great saving habits, and we should all do that. We should find the thing that really motivates us to take some of the money and put it away, and then use some of the money wisely for the things that will keep us going every day and move us forward.
Wonderful, Warren. Thank you. Question from Judy this evening. It's a higher grade question, so this is where we bring you in. I don't know why you're asking me this question, Judy. Hi, Bruce. No. It should be hi, Warren. I'm retiring next month. Should I take a cash portion out of my retirement fund or transfer the full amount to a pension? Great question, Judy. That one's for Warren in a moment.
The Money Show. Personal finance with Warren Ingram.
Judy is retiring next month. Should she take a cash portion out of her retirement fund or transfer the full amount to a pension? Warren.
So just a little bit of background there. The law allows us to take the first 550,000 Rand of our retirement funds as a tax-free lump sum. There are whole lots of terms and conditions, to that, but just very basically, first 550,000 Rand you can take, tax-free, and for most people, I would say that makes a lot of sense. Especially if you don't really have a lot of available cash from other investments, and your retirement fund is pretty much your only investment, then taking that cash lump sum that you're allowed to take out makes sense to me, and especially if that's going to become the basis for your emergency fund and maybe for money that you need to replace cars in the future and other kind of big unforeseen expenses. Then I would say definitely. The people that should consider a bit more carefully would be on the other side of the spectrum. So someone who's retiring with a massive, retirement fund, and they know that they're going to pay really big taxes on income, etc. They might be in a position where it actually makes sense to transfer that entire amount, to a living annuity, because they're going to draw a very small amount from that living annuity and probably leave the bulk of the money to the next generation, to their children. Massive tax benefits in doing that because they save estate duty and executors' fees and all sorts of things. So I think that it's unfortunately not one answer for all of us in this situation, but for most of us, taking the tax-free lump sum for me makes sense. But yeah, you got to do your homework on this one and just get a little bit of advice before you pull that trigger.
Absolutely. And again, it's that idea of where does the money best serve you in this context. I mean, if you've got a great pension fund, if it's well invested and you get decent growth in that pension fund, well, that's fine. But the 550,000 Rand invest, as long as you're taking it and not taking it to go and, spend on fun stuff because you didn't spend as a youngster. As long as it's going to be invested and invested wisely, you may give you a little bit of variety also in terms of where you can invest money and where you can get some decent returns.
Absolutely. I think one of the things about that lump sum, when you take it out, is that as you say,
I can have that overseas holiday I've dreamt about all through my hateful working career. Yes.
And if you've done your planning correctly, well done. That's the reward you're giving yourself. But if you need the money, then please don't splurge it. But for example, you can go and invest the money overseas, or get a bigger offshore allocation within your local investments, and by all means do that. The taxes on that could be quite small. If you don't keep it all in cash, where you'll pay massive income tax on the interest. If you actually invest it properly in exchange traded funds or unit trusts, the likelihood is you're paying capital gains tax, which could be quite small. So it can be very tax efficient to take that lump sum out, but it does get added to your estate. So again, just be careful there. But I would say, most people take it. Most people can't fathom the idea of leaving, anything extra in their pension fund. They hate the rules and the restrictions, so they just take it. And as long as they take it and invest it wisely, it's probably not a bad idea. But it's not a no-brainer as it sounds for most people just to always take it. I don't think that's necessarily true.
Warren Ingram, thank you very, very much indeed from Galileo Capital. Judy, please get proper adult advice on this. You'll be given some tips, some guidance, but every single case absolutely is different. Warren Ingram, Executive Director, Personal Financial Advisor at Galileo Capital.